A large reunion party on James Jackson Parkway in Northwest Atlanta ends in one man dead and another injured. Police say nearly 1,000 people were at the block party when that shooting happened overnight. And now GBI is investigating because an APD officer patrolling that area fired several shots during the incident. 11 Alive's Shanu Hur has the latest on the investigation.
Police tape still lingers here near the intersection of James Jackson Parkway and Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway in Northwest Atlanta. All of this stemming from at least two people who began shooting at each other Sunday morning during a party. APD says a patrolling officer in the area stumbled upon all of this.
We're in the process of conducting a directed patrol. While on scene, the officer encountered gunfire being exchanged between individuals. As a result of that gunfire, the officer discharged his weapon.
The shooting left one man, Gabriel Parker, dead at the scene and another man injured. The officer was not hurt. Parker's family tells 11 Alive he's a father of two and they're all heartbroken over his death, but did not want to speak on camera about him. They say he was there early Sunday morning just celebrating Bowen Homes Day, a reunion of people remembering the Bowen Homes public housing project. Deputy Chief Timothy Peak says there were about 1,000 people at the event, unsanctioned by the city.
Very crowded situation. What we did also find on the scene after securing everything, we were able to determine that there were several firearms discarded or left on the actual scenes.
Right now, the GBI is helping with the investigation. APD says it's still unclear who shot which person.
And happening in just about 30 minutes, there will be a vigil held for last night's victim. Family and friends will gather to remember Gabriel Parker. You're seeing the picture right there. This begins at 6:30 on James Jackson Parkway.